Hi, I'm Terry McGovern. I'm the Senior Associate Dean at CUNY School of Public Health here in New York City, and I am thrilled to be meeting my friend, Oriana López. Oriana, what brings you to New York?
I'm here to attend the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women. So I'm here visiting for 2 weeks, a little bit less than 2 weeks. Yeah.
That's very exciting for us here in New York. When we first met, you were at RESURJ, which is a transnational alliance of younger global South feminists. But I know your activism started even much earlier, when you were 15. Can you talk to us about what moved you to become an activist?
Yes, I spent my childhood visiting churches because of my mom's work and clinics because of my dad's work around Mexico. And I could see how women were promoting health in their communities and were giving contraception to their friends, to their relatives, to any women that would come to them in their little towns, in the jungle or in different parts of Mexico, and how they were doing it just because they wanted their communities to be better for the women. So I was very familiar with those kind of injustices, that they needed to go do that on their own because the government was not able to reach them.
But 15 is pretty young.
I know, but my family, those were my holidays, visiting churches for my mom's work and visiting clinics. And visiting clinics and community centers.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So I know that one of RESURJ's principles is that it's for activists under 40. And after 12 years there, this month you officially aged out, which is very hard for me to believe. Can you talk a little bit about why RESURJ operates this way, and what some of the impacts of this kind of age restriction from RESURJ have been?
Well, one thing is that when we talk about intergenerational exchanges, we tend to think only about young feminists and older feminists as if there was only two generations. Mm-hmm. And at that point that we started research, we were thinking that we know that there's different layers of feminists, and we think that people that are below 40 are hardly ever taking a space that it doesn't come with a young tag on it. And there was also a lot of emptiness or lack of political groundness in what youth organizations were doing in terms of other than youth participation is important. And we want to say, why is it important? Why young people can say things. So one of the things that we have, or characteristics that we have in research, has to do with having a grassroots level experience, knowing what's happening, different levels of organizing, and that we could bring this knowledge to the global spaces so that it's not completely unlinked with the realities back home. And also that we know what's happening here and what our governments are saying here, so we can bring it back and make sure that they're implementing it and not just saying it, and making friends with other countries, but actually implementing for people that need it back home.
So I think, when I first started to do global work, which would have been early 2000s, there pretty much were only, the model was global North entities kind of bringing women from the global South to represent at the UN, and in lots of multilateral venues. And what I saw happen was, when RESURJ was created, were young women from the global South saying, we need to represent ourselves. We need to be in those spaces. We don't need to be brought here by others. And I have to reflect that I see a lot of the women who were super young when I first met folks really now in pretty important positions. And important to me doesn't mean they have some title. It means they're in a position where they can really have an impact. And I really see that. I would just like to say I got to be the formal advisor to RESURJ for I think 5 years or something for a while early on. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like RESURJ is pretty incredible.
Of course, I love it, and I think that I was very lucky to be able to spend there 12 years. And it is about placing ourselves, supporting each other, and placing ourselves in I don't know, like small groups or like in special spaces where we can actually make changes and change also the ways that the feminist movement or the movement that's working on sexual and reproductive rights is working. They keep doing it, and this idea of like the people that are coming from the different countries from the global south, they only come here to as a token of the global south sort of way, and we're just obeying what the global north has planned for us. And I think that is still happening in the ways that we organize as a global movement, but research is still like trying to put that highlight on like this is not a good practice, this is not the way that we're supposed to be working. One thing that we have changed, for example, is that if you're gonna go talk to my government, I should be there and let you know what you should be talking about to my government, not the other way around. Like, you're not going to tell me what I need to tell my government. Also, this idea, and we have been trying to, throughout the many years that RESURJ has been working, more than 15, is making sure that we don't antagonize countries and we characterize them as good or bad countries. Not this idea of like, oh, the African governments are going to bring all this, pushback on gender. And, well, right now we can see that the gender it has a pushback here in the US. So it's not coming only from specific countries, but also trying to show them how geopolitics have also a lot to do with who has the money and how they get the money, and a little bit like unveil those things so that we can be more critical and have opinions that are more politicized.
It's super interesting. I think that RESURJ's creation and all of the work that you've all done really kind of questions, interrogates one of the biggest things that anti-women's governments or voices say, which is women's rights or human rights is a Western concept, and it only emanates from the global north, and it's all colonization that has folks using this language. Do you think RESURJ has been able to kind of turn that on its head a bit?
I think that it is important that there are voices coming from the South defending and claiming this also from a different language, from a different context, and in different ways, so that we can show that and not, how do I say it? Not that it's a shallow thing, but like really bringing our own experiences on how we need to humanize everybody, and that we need to keep protecting what we have achieved in the 90s. And also, like, what are the ways that we can advance that are not coming from the North? So it's a little bit of like a self-criticism to our movement in saying, like, we need to change the lead so that we don't get accused of those things, because it's partially true. Like, how if we're like reproducing those practices, how can we convey that it's not a Western agenda or a Northern agenda if we're actually like following what the Northern or the INGOs say, right?
I think one other thing that's interesting to me about RESURJ and the model of, it's for activists under 40 is, we know that sometimes people take jobs and they get comfortable in the jobs, and maybe they stay beyond the point at which they're most effective. So the interesting thing about RESURJ is that's not really possible. You can be there for a time, right? But no matter what, you move on. And I feel like I see more RESURJ people, former employees or people who are involved in all of these interesting places in some senses, because that's the way it's set up for people to kind of move on, which I think is a really interesting concept beyond age even.
I mean, the idea is that we become a platform. So we've never registered. We are not an organization with a, a special framework and a structure that then it stays fixed in something. I think that's part of being part of the movement, is like moving around. So we want the research to be flexible and to be that platform that allows for people to come in when they need to be there, and then allow for other people to come in, so by living, because there's only so many people that we can have in research, that then for me living is perfect, because that means that I'm leaving the space for someone else to have the possibility of that support and that platform, and that also it's also to decide what you want to do. Maybe you decide to try this out and you see like the UN is not my thing, for example, and then you go back home and you rather stay at the grassroots or change, either way. And yeah, I think it also has different ways that we can become a platform for others. You don't have to be a member of research to be like benefited from this platform. We have the blog, that the idea is to enhance global South voices, so that we can be critical to what's happening in our context and in the global context. We have also different cross-regional meetings. We have thematic meetings and discussions, because we want to keep reflecting and challenging ourselves. So I think that for me, research gave me all of that, and I can keep on doing
quite something.
Yeah, I mean, like, just because we did this that way 20 years ago, that doesn't mean that we need to keep doing it, right?
Right. That's what I love actually about RESURJ, everything you just said. Okay, so in addition to RESURJ, you train abortion doulas. You're active in feminist networks such as Vecinas Feministas, the Latin American network of feminists for sexual and reproductive justice. You also play an integral role in reimagining the civil society-led global 16 days of activism to end gender-based violence as a year-round campaign. Do you want to talk about some of the important learnings you have from these experiences? What do you want to share with others? Just kind of what are some important themes you think jump out from all of this work?
Well, one thing that has to do with sexual reproductive rights, I think that, and justice, it has to do with things that we tend to look bad upon or like criminalize, like abortion, but also like sex work, and like everything that has sexuality around it is something that society tiptoe around. And so I really think that we are missing on the possibility of talking about that more openly, and then embrace bodily autonomy, embrace pleasure, this kind of a well-being, and some of what the indigenous peoples defend so much on well-being. It also comes from pleasure and from sexuality. So, and for me, is talking about how is the world that we want to build? No, how does it feel? That world that we want to transform this world into that one. How does it feel? And for me, it's also it's a complete change of paradigm in that sense, and how we think about things. For example, abortion. If we focus on very specific things, on like where is life beginning, these kind of things that we're never gonna get an answer on, it's really hard to talk about it. But when you talk about people making the choice and people being able to decide about their future and their present right now, and how can they get whatever they need to get the families and build the families that they want, like everything that is around that. So it's not only about the services on abortion in particular, but also like, is everything else around working? That do you want to have offspring coming into this world and this society and this community? Like, do I have the conditions to do that? And what are the kind of dreams? I think that it's about freedom as well. Like, am I free to express myself? Am I free to build the life that I want, or not? And
So how do you work those kind of concepts into the campaign to end gender-based violence, for example?
Well, that was exactly the point of the campaign, was like, how do we talk about these things, not from the data that we have that is like so strongly on everything that's wrong, but rather think about like, why are we not building a world that give us the freedom to feel pleasure, give us the freedom to be happy with our bodies, whatever they look like, to really embrace how beautiful we are, how healthy we are, how can we imagine a place where we actually is built for health, not built for like curing sickness or and right now in this moment I think that we are seeing a lot of dehumanization around, so it's also bringing us back to what makes us human, and what makes us the same is that the idea of like expressing ourselves through our bodies and sharing our bodies and appreciating each other's bodies. So, and it's also connection with one another in that sense.
I think so. One of the things that public health has tended to do through the years is to kind of measure bad things, to put it simply, right? So kind of what you're saying is that just telling us how many people, women, girls, have experienced gender-based violence, these crushing data points may not actually shift anything, right? But perhaps images around a positive life, what the alternatives can be, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
yes, it's about motivation, right? And for me, it's about having the energy in the right place. I feel like there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of, and these numbers and these figures, sometimes it's also brings us down instead of looking forward to something that can be more exciting and desirable. So yeah, it's also having very clear where we're going to, so that we can see beyond the fog. So yeah.
So one of the themes that connects all your work is obviously bodily autonomy, which, you know, is something we are hearing a lot of recently, but really it's connecting a whole lot of different issues, right? Bodily autonomy. Can you just talk a little bit about what does bodily autonomy mean to you? How can we all promote and defend bodily autonomy against the growing transnational anti-gender movement? So that's a lot, but let's start with bodily autonomy. What does that mean to you?
For me, it's about freedom, and it's about respect, and it's allowing everybody, not just that I have the right, but you also have the right, and everybody has the right to have a body and to express through their body and to feel through their body, and like acknowledge that. I think that we live in a society that is focused a lot on the brain and on the intellectual part of us, as if that was of more value than our bodies. And when it is the body that is carrying us around, it is the body that has a brain and holds the brain, and it is the brain that is holding the body. So it's about dignity, and it's about knowing that not allowing someone to fully feel free in their own body is terrible, is dehumanizing, is against everything, right? Like it's you cannot be a religious person and do that. You cannot be a good person and do that to another human. So it's for me, bodily autonomy is the full respect that somebody else has to to just live happy.
It seems, though, to be totally central to the growing transnational anti-gender movements, this control of bodies, right? Why do you think that is? Why is that present in every single kind of anti-gender movement we see?
Because if they control our bodies, they control us. They control the narrative, they control our feelings, they can control the economy, they can control, and they do that to benefit themselves, right? Like, as the little opinions that we have, the little expressions that we have, then they have all of it. And I think that it is scary to think that they can have as much power as they have now. But at the same time, it's just like we're more. There's more of us than it is of them. So how can we just, like, all of us embrace each other's respect and dignity and freedom, so that we can then together, like rise for a freer world and a freer society that is beyond control. So sometimes even people that can be working on abortion, and they can be like supportive of abortion law, whatever, they still want the state to register every abortion. It's like, why do we need to know how many abortions they occur. Like that is still control, and I think that it is because it is in our subconscious still. This idea that control is best, or that somebody needs to control us, or we're gonna be super free. Like we are afraid of freedom, and I think that they made us afraid of freedom.
It's super interesting when you describe it that way. I do think, the obsession with transgender, the obsession in this country now, there's two sexes, the obsession with abortion, none of these obsessions are matched by a commitment to making sure, pregnant women get access to the care that they need, making sure, it's all very contradictory. And I think the way you said it is very powerful. It's totally about control. It's actually not about facts, evidence, any of those things. And it is, I think, extremely distressing to see that it is such a rallying cry for so many people around the world. So along the U.S., along with Russia and Argentina, have been at the forefront of efforts to strip bodily autonomy from women, girls, and gender diverse people worldwide. And this year, as the Commission on the Status of Women wraps up, it's been particularly intense, right? Do you have any words of advice or encouragement to share with those living in these countries, including those of us here in the U.S.? And of course, you can speak Spanish or English, whichever you prefer.
At this point, I'm going to switch to Spanish. Well, one thing has to do with is that solidarity, and I would say different things to the U.S. than I would say to Argentina, and I'm not going to speak to Russians because that is completely away from my experience, and I wouldn't want to be that person, Mexicans blaming Russia,
giving advice. Right?
Yes. Right. But I think that for the U.S. would be to remember, and I think it's really hard for the U.S. to remember that there's a world outside. I think that the people in the U.S. tend to think about the U.S. as the planet, and everything is generalized as if Texas was the thing that further away, and and in that sense, then remembering that there's solidarity, and so much of that global focus on the U.S., it's also working in your benefit as you're resisting this. So I think that it is a moment to look inwards, yes, and work inwards, but also remember that there's people outside that can also help you. So this idea that the U.S. is always the highest standard, I hope that now you understand that it's not the highest standard, and that you can also reach out to other countries from the global south or the global north that can support you through ideas, through rallies, through knowing that you are not alone in this. And that you're not carrying the whole world either. So that, these two things. And for Argentina, I think, creo que una de las cosas que nos falta en América Latina es recordar que no hay un presidente o una presidenta que van a cambiar todo. Entonces, como siempre mantener la idea de comunidad y poder recordarnos que esta idea neoliberal de que cada quien se defiende con sus propias uñas es una forma en la que el capitalismo gana y el neoliberalismo gana y gente como Milei ganan. Entonces, acordarnos siempre de hacer comunidad, de establecer redes y alianzas, y que también Argentina tiene la fortuna de estar en una región, es América Latina, y que somos súper cercanos y podemos siempre estar abrazándonos y estrechando lazos.
I think certainly, out of the many things at CSW that I listened to, hearing people who had lived through the Bolsonaro regime, hearing activists from countries that had lived through this kind of a period was super helpful, both in terms of teaching those of us in the U.S. that, in fact, many countries have been here before, and there are ways to survive, and in some weird ways, there's opportunities in all of this kind of demolition that's going on, opportunities for new connections, new ways of working, and certainly on the abortion issue, it was really, for me, seeing how activists all around the world were refusing to just discuss abortion, connecting it to all of the stuff you were talking about, economics, families, all of it. Really taught me a lot when we were heading towards, the Dobbs decision. So I think we have so much to learn in the U.S., and I think we need to all, we know there's a lot published on how the right-wing transnational movements work together, what they do. I think we all need to do a little bit more on kind of collecting the ways that feminists have figured out how to not only survive, but strategically resist all over the world. So certainly I think that's something that these kind of meetings are useful for. I just want to also say that what you do feel when you go, even in a moment like this in the U.S. to CSW, is just how there are these incredibly dedicated people all over the world resisting on a daily basis, resisting the impossible and refusing to ever kind of give up on human dignity. And that's just kind of, it's true now, it's always been true, and I think we can't ever lose sight of that. So thank you, Oriana, for joining us. I'll say to anybody watching, you can learn more about bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive justice by following the CUNY SRJ Hub and the Global 365 Days of Activism to NGBV on social media. You can find us on the web at sph.cuny.edu/research/SRJ Hub. And on Instagram at 365-NGBV. And once again, thank you, Oriana, and thank you all for listening today.